Doctor Who, or as we Americans call it, Doctor What Now, has been a huge part of my love of science fiction and fantasy adventure storytelling since I was a small child. At least I think that's my backstory. But who am I? Hello there. You can call me Kay. I've been trapped out here in space for an indeterminate amount of time, floating endlessly in what appears to be an old 1930s Art Deco apartment building. Ironically, my ship is much smaller on the inside than the out. Beyond the front door of this console room, which just so happens to look like a small studio apartment, lies the cold, endless void of space. Bigger on the outside. Seems like some Time Lord's idea of a bad joke. Speaking of Time Lords, I managed to keep myself occupied mostly by watching a collection of DVDs I found here on a shelf. A series of adventures through time and space, featuring a mysterious traveler known only as the Doctor. My primary source of entertainment, and the only thing really keeping me sane on my endless journey to somewhere? Nowhere? I gotta confess, I'm suffering from an amnesia of some sort, and I don't really know why I'm here, or how long I've been here, or even who I am. Was I sent here for a reason? A punishment? An accident? My investigations have proven inconclusive so far, except for one clue. This photograph, which I believe to be a picture of myself as a child. I've decided to record myself and broadcast said recordings out into space in the hopes that somebody, anybody, may pick up the signal and mount a rescue of some sorts. Sadly, I have no coordinates to give you, and I can't control this damn machine to save my life. The only thing I figured out how to work is this camera and the broadcast system. I'll continue my investigation in the hopes that I may unearth some new clue that, if I cannot decipher myself, perhaps you can, whoever you may be. Take this photo, for example. I must confess, when I stare at it, I do get a strange feeling, a strong emotion, a sort of pulling at the heartstrings, like a warm, fuzzy blanket being wrapped around me. Could this be nostalgia? For a lost childhood? As I stare more deeply into the photograph, I can sense myself sinking into a past that I don't so much remember as feel. It is intoxicating.
Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I? I can't stand the confusion in my mind.
Doctor Who is one of the earliest things I can remember being obsessed with as a child. I remember piling onto the couch with my family every Friday night to watch the much anticipated next episode of the epic ongoing Doctor Who saga. Of course, at this point in my life, I'd already immersed myself in several other science fiction and action adventure stories with higher budgets and better production values, and I was obsessed with them as well. Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, and Indiana Jones were already deeply embedded in my 8-year-old psyche, not to mention the plethora of animated series like He-Man, Thundercats, Transformers, and the real Ghostbusters. And yet, something about Doctor Who grabbed me and pushed those other stories a bit to the side. My best guess is that it was something about the truly alien nature of the series. It had a darker, more adult tone than any of the other more precisely calibrated all-ages fare I was used to. People died in every episode, sometimes quite horribly. There was blood. The Doctor took things deadly serious, and so I did as well. It probably helped that I was dropped into the series during the public broadcasting station WTTW Chicago's Tom Baker cycle, which was a repeated loop of Baker's first 4 seasons, 3 of which were Philip Hinchcliffe's Gothic run of the series, based on classic Hammer horror stories and tropes. The scary hide-behind-the-couch aspect of the series was very much real and very much an effect on my young brain.
The speech center isn't functioning properly. Look! Don't you recognize me? I made you!
Hi, my name is Jeffrey. I'm a subscriber to Channel 11, WTTW in Chicago.
I remember my parents watching WTTW almost religiously. They would watch Upstairs, Downstairs, The McLaughlin Group, Wild Chicago, and then donate to a pledge drive to keep these shows they loved running.
Marty Robinson with Jody Muslin. Spearhead from Space will continue anon. We'll take a few minutes to see if we can raise the funds to keep the next generation or next regeneration of Doctor Who on the air whenever that comes about.
It made the channel feel very hometown, community-driven, and inclusive. Like we, well, my parents at least, were actively choosing what shows we wanted and keeping them alive. Then one day, after the latest episode of Upstairs Downstairs ended, the willowy, kindly yet epic-sounding voice of Marty Robinson emanated from the TV screen, announcing that a new, bone-chilling adventure of Doctor Who was about to air, the Sontaran Experiment.
This is 11, WTTW, the Chicago television home of the redoubtable Time Lord, Doctor Who.
This caught the interest of my dad, and myself as well, so we hunkered down in our seats to see what was in store for us. Then suddenly... that music! That quicksilver blue space tunnel. That face! This blew my mind. I was immediately in love with whatever strange thing was emanating out of my television set. Then, a barren landscape. Mysterious, very tall man with a giant mop of curly hair and an impossibly long scarf appeared out of thin air, accompanied by a couple of rather dapper-looking friends. This was interesting. We watched the episode together, enraptured by the simple story of some stranded space marines being hunted by a mysterious, evil alien monster with a head shaped like a potato and a spaceship that resembled the Epcot Center. I was immediately hooked by the horror and otherworldliness of the story, and also by the Doctor's 1,000 watts of charisma and humor in the face of such threats. He was able to both deliver the gravitas and seriousness of the situation, enough to sell the wonky special effects and low budget, yet also had the charm, wit, and humor to make me feel safe, like he was definitely a match for whatever the trouble was.
Whatever you do, don't touch him. Don't touch him.
Get your hands up. Turn around, Doctor. Facing this way.
We annoyed
Shut
you
up.
or something?
Okay, stop talking.
Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart had perfect pitch.
What happened to him?
Who, Wolfgang Amadeus? Oh, him. Oh, he died.
He was like the Mad Hatter. I was also a big fan of Alice in Wonderland, combined with Doc Brown from Back to the Future and action hero Indiana Jones. A mad, wild bohemian space adventurer. I immediately wanted to be the Doctor and live in that world. Even dressed up as him regularly, parading around the house with my mom's scarf and a hilarious vest that I'm sure one of my parents wore in the 70s. Brandishing a socket wrench screwdriver and leading my little sister around as my faithful companion Sarah Jane. There was also the fact that basically none of my peers seemed to know or care about the science fiction series, so it truly became a bit of a special secret between me and my family. An underground cult classic just for us. Since this is WTTW Chicago's run of the series, I was able to catch the entire story in one sitting, with the cliffhanger edited out to make the two-parter into a seamless single 45-minute adventure. In that time, WTTW and several other American and Canadian broadcast stations played the stories as single omnibus or Whovian versions, with all the cliffhangers edited out and the story stitched together into one 45 or hour-and-a-half movie. If it was a 6-parter, they would split them into 2 episodes of 3 parts each. My nostalgia for the series is for the omnibus versions, and it wasn't until years later when we began purchasing the VHS tapes that I even realized the original format was 23-minute episodes with cliffhangers. This is why I was able to experience the moment that is burned into my brain on the first viewing. The moment that I believe truly cemented my love and fascination with Doctor Who forever. But this effect blew my mind. It terrified and fascinated me at the same time. What a way to end a story! From this point on, I was hooked. Yes, this effect looks cheap and ramshackle by today's standards, or even by the standards of other shows and movies I was watching in the early 90s. But it was also something I had never seen before. The series was chock full of these inventive, low-budget yet still creepy practical effects. I remember even as a child understanding that the production looked cheaper and more obviously fake than most of the other stuff I watched. And yet, even that drew me in. Little did I know that these episodes had been filmed over a decade before I was even born. I cheered when an effect came off looking halfway decent, like the smoke sucking back into Scarman's chest in the Pyramid of Mars.
Marcus?
And I bemoaned effects that just weren't quite up to snuff, or could have used another take, like the obvious ragdoll flopping about on Tom Baker's back when he struggled with the peaking homunculus in the finale of The Talons of Wing Chiang. There was just something even more magical about seeing these stories put together with bubble wrap and plywood, shot on old SD cameras, looking at times more like a stage play than a television show. And it encouraged my young mind to fill in the gaps and utilize my own imagination to play along with the Doctor and his companions. It made me feel on some level like I was participating in the creation of the show's atmosphere, more than other movies and shows that did the work for me. This influence undoubtedly encouraged my lifelong love of filmmaking, special effects, and animation. Upon researching the broadcast history of Doctor Who on WTTW, I discovered that there was an especially strong run of episodes and a strong following for Doctor Who in America in the 80s through the early 90s.
About 6 years ago, I'd read an article in Famous Monsters magazine that talked about this British science fiction show.
Well, Eddie, my nephew here, turned me on to Doctor Who, and ever since then he's been my favorite. He's just my hero.
My son introduced me to the whole thing, and now I'm as addicted as he is.
I had a friend who was absolutely crazy about it and knew I loved science fiction.
I spent a lot of time in England and watched Doctor Who, and I thought it was a worthwhile program.
Our sole purpose is to help promote Doctor Who here in North America.
This was the sweet spot when I was lucky enough to happen to start watching. As I mentioned earlier, during this time period, WTTW was running primarily the Tom Baker loop, which is the first 4 seasons. Robot through the Invasion of Time, played continuously, and then they would double back and run all the color episodes of John Pertwee's. They did broadcast Davison through McCoy episodes, and eventually the old 60s episodes on occasion, but it was far more inconsistent and spread out compared to the solid block of seasons 7 through 15, and especially seasons 12 through 15. Because of this, my nostalgia and deepest affections lie squarely with Tom Baker, specifically the first half of his era, and John Pertwee. Nowadays, I've finally managed to watch every single episode of classic Doctor Who, from An Unearthly Child to Survival, and I can see why this particular block of episodes was favored so strongly, as I consider it to be the best, most consistent, and relatively timeless run of episodes the classic series has ever produced. Therefore, while my intent is to eventually review every single episode of the classic and modern series of the show, I'll be starting my reviews with Tom Baker's first story, Robot, and work my way through his 7 seasons before moving on. I have much more nostalgia I could pour into these videos in the future. I haven't even gotten into my obsessive VHS recording of the series, scouring of used bookstores to find the novelizations and spin-off books, or how I fell out of and then back into love with the series years later as a college student when the revival began. But those are tales for another day. In the meantime, look forward to my upcoming review of the classic Tom Baker story, Robot. I'll attempt to post these reviews as quickly as possible, but I have no concept of time here, so I guess they're just going to happen when they happen. Thanks for watching my nostalgic rant. Oh, must have dozed off there for a minute. Apologies, I tend to do that sometimes. Long story short, was I telling a story? Oh, long story short, if there's somebody, anybody out there, please respond. Thanks for listening. Kay, signing out. Who the hell are you?